Hi everyone, this is NUSensei. Today we'll be covering a slightly more complex topic, the rotational draw, otherwise known as the angular draw. Most people who do archery will be familiar with the straight draw or the linear draw. And the basic premise is that when you lift a bow, you draw it straight to your anchor point and then you release. There are some personal variations such as where you start and how far back you anchor, but for the most part, a straight draw or linear draw is an A to B method. You start here, you end up here, and you do your shot. The straight draw is one of the most intuitive ways to shoot. It's what most people learn and what most people stick to for their archery careers. However, you will see some archers, especially Olympic-style archers, do something slightly different. Instead of pulling straight back into their anchor point, they will go around the side and then hit their anchor point. Something like this. So to clarify, a straight draw or linear draw basically keeps the draw in line with the arrow. A rotational draw or angular draw starts off at an angle, works around, and then goes in line. So if the straight draw is the simplest A to B method, why bother learning about the rotational draw? The answer is biomechanics. It's not about which one is more effective. Both achieve the same end result. Rather, it's which method is more efficient. Which method makes better use of the human anatomy. The principle behind a straight draw is that it follows the shortest path, A to B. The problem is that that's actually not how human bodies work. We are not built to pull things in a straight line. When we think about the human body, our arms, our shoulders, our elbows, our hands, our wrists, they are not lined up in a perfectly straight object. Rather, all our body parts here are joined together in what is basically a chain. A chain is not a single rigid rod. It consists of smaller parts which can move independently, much like I can move my hands and forearms and upper arms and shoulders left and right independently. But in order to pull an object, these different parts of the chain must work together in order to accomplish that task. The reason a straight draw is simple and works is basically you are overpowering the weight of the bow. If the bow is 20 pounds, you simply push and pull like this with 21 pounds or 22 pounds of force and you can draw the string back. The problem is that the straight draw generally puts the weight on the wrong muscles. The weight generally is placed on the shoulders, which is a place you don't really want to overstrain, because these muscles are the most common sources of injury for archers, especially in the drawing shoulder. Because a lot of people who do a straight draw, especially with very high draw weights, will draw back correctly, but won't necessarily transfer the weight into the back muscles, which is where you want the weight to be. So the weight stays in the drawing shoulder, hence why the rotator cuff is very vulnerable to injury when doing archery, especially with wrong technique. Does it mean that the straight draw is dangerous? No, of course not. Most people do it just fine. As long as you remember to anchor and transfer correctly, straight draw works fine. However, like I said before, it's not about what works, but what is more efficient. This is more strenuous on the shoulders, and as a result, you may fatigue faster, you may find yourself not anchoring at the exact spot every single time because you are working just a bit harder to get the draw and the string in the right place. So in the big picture, this may not be the easiest way to get to your anchor point and complete your shot process. Rotational draw, instead of working in straight lines and overcoming things with just more power, it exploits angles, hence why it's also called the angular draw. The concept is that of triangulation. Now, if you look at coaching manuals like Keith Lee's Total Archery, they'll explain angular draw using muscle groups and LAPs and that sort of thing, which can boggle people. But for those who are kinesthetic learners, I'll demonstrate the idea. So with a straight draw, you are pulling straight back like this, relying on your arms and your back muscles and your shoulder muscles to achieve that full draw. Angular draw is a lot more triangular. Now think about it this way, okay? So instead of starting here with the arms in line and pulling straight back, I'm instead starting like this. My elbow is pointing out that way. The idea is that I'm keeping the arrow in line with my forearm. The forearm does not change angle. I draw back to this point and then turn inwards. Now I am kind of exaggerating just to show you how it works. But the idea is that it's easier to draw from here to here and then from here to here. Now, in contrast, with a straight draw, while it is the shorter path, it isn't necessarily the easiest path because, again, you're relying more on your shoulder muscles to get that line in place. Whereas, if you use the triangular method or the angular method where you go here and then here, while it is a longer path, it's actually using your muscles more efficiently. It's using your triceps and this part of your back and shoulder to get it in place. Again, we'll see it from the back. So the straight draw method, you go straight line to here. With angular draw, you start from here, you draw out here, and then you bring it back in. Now, this will vary between different individuals. Some will have a much more exaggerated movement. Others will have a more compact movement. But the principle is still the same. Instead of having a single draw straight back, it's kind of broken into two parts. You go from here to here and then here. Now, with proper training and practice, this becomes one fluid draw. So you don't see people go 1, 2. It's more of a fluid motion like that. But the idea is still there. It's using the angles to get the most efficient draw each time rather than using raw strength to get the string back. Hopefully this angle shows the picture a little better. So with a straight draw, you go right back in like that. With an angular draw, you start from here, you go off to the side, and then you come back here. And again, the reasoning is this short draw motion is more efficient use of your muscles. By using the angle of your shoulders and your elbow, you're able to draw this with less effort. It's still the same weight, but less effort to do this than come around here. That is generally what the angular draw method comprises of. And you may be surprised if you try this. Again, from the side view, we have the straight draw, like that, and the angular draw. And again, when you practice, you go from having a staggered two-step motion to having a single fluid draw. And again, watch a lot of the Olympians do this. that will have this down very carefully. Now, again, this isn't universally taught. Some methods will teach this specifically and explicitly as the way to draw a bow. Others are a bit more flexible. So this isn't the one best way. Despite the irony of the best method or the biomechanically efficient shooting technique, a lot of people will shoot just fine with a straight draw. And just while we're still up there, let's do some shooting with the bow to see what angular draw looks like from high angle. Now, a very common tip which you'll see is that you should be leading with the elbow or drawing with the elbow rather than using your arms to do the movement. That makes a lot of sense. And while you won't necessarily see this on camera, it does feel easier. Now, I shoot a 40-pound bow, around 35 on the fingers, so I'm a very small guy. But in the last couple of rounds I've been shooting, I've been using angular draw and I've been shooting with a lot more efficiency. I feel less tired with each shot because I'm putting less strain on the wrong muscles. And that's the entire point of efficiency. It doesn't make your shooting better, but it allows you to shoot with good form longer. And we'll use the traditional bear bow just to compare and contrast. So starting with a straight draw, and then angular draw. And that's another carbon arrow rect. And one more, this time we'll hold the anchor for a bit longer. As I said before, the most obvious benefit is that it's more efficient, which means it should feel like you're putting in less effort. And for some people who try this, it feels too easy. So it just means that you're using your body in a way in which it can pull that weight or carry that load without overstraining the smaller muscles. Remember, in archery, focus on using big muscles, not small muscles. In addition to being more efficient and fatiguing less, the fact that you're putting less effort into drawing the bow means that you've got more control over the finesse of the shot process. Things like the exact anchor point, things like the transfer and the expansion and the release. When you're pulling back and you're already fighting the bow, it's very hard to execute a clean shot process. So by minimizing the effort required to pull back, it is easier to shoot clean shots. That's generally a thing for draw weight as well. But if you're shooting a high draw weight or heavy draw weight for you, then using the angular draw might make it easier for you as well. I also find that using correct angular draw makes it easier to get your shoulders in alignment. So I do find that when I use a straight draw, I do often have the front shoulder popping up, and that can obviously cause injury, but if not injury, then it does lead to a much shakier shot. So the angular draw generally keeps the shoulder down, and it's a bit easier for people to maintain that alignment all the way through. Again, this isn't exclusive to the angular draw. People who shoot straight draw can drop the shoulder and pull back fine just as well. So it's not a matter of which one is better necessarily, it's which one you train in and can make work well. Basically, it's a choice between what is literally a more straightforward technique versus something that's a bit more technical but should work a little better. Now, there are a few comments floating around talking about an increased risk of injury. I can't substantiate this. From what I understand, people who injure their shoulders attempting these techniques are doing so incorrectly. And this goes for both the straight draw and the angular draw. The reason is if you're not loading the weight correctly off your shoulders, especially these rotator cuffs, then you are more likely to injure yourself. So if you're shooting a high draw weight and you don't draw correctly, either straight draw or angular, then you are going to risk injury. This isn't exclusive to an angular draw. People who shoot straight draw will equally injure themselves if they don't do it correctly. If there's a downside to the angular draw, it's perhaps that it's not instinctive. People probably won't acquire it naturally. I mean, people who pick up a bow and shoot it without much instruction will probably go straight draw. Angular draw is a little outside the box, so unless someone shows you or teaches you, you probably won't pick it up naturally. And the extension to that is that you might not recognize if you're doing it right or wrong, and that's why perhaps it's a bit less popular in the mainstream self-taught circles. Whereas in the formal training arena, things like the Olympic style archery, especially in the US, where it's basically the standard method for NTS or BEST or the KSL method, it is widely used in the Olympic style of archery because, again, the sports science and the research behind it basically shows that this is perhaps the most efficient method of using a bow with our human anatomy. Doesn't mean you can't shoot without it? No, of course not. People shoot well without it. But in terms of the purpose of shooting lots of arrows with as much precision and efficiency as possible, it is arguably the best method. That's why it's called the best method. Anyway, I hope this was helpful. This is NUSensei. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.